Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast. My name is Fear Dragon, and I'm going to be bringing you guys coverage of the WCS North America Challenger League Ladder Qualifier. Now, first of all, you may be wondering, that's a lot of different words. What does that actually mean? What is this event about? Well, first of all, WCS Challenger is a system that I think most people who follow StarCraft and who have found this channel will be fairly familiar with, but for this particular season, we have 8 players that qualified through the ladder qualifier spots. In the past, it was all 16 players that would play in WCS Challenger would play from the ladder qualifier, make it through, and then play in the eventual Challenger League bracket. But this season, it's only 8 players. 8 more players are going to be qualifying through the open bracket events. And these 8 players happen to have qualified under slightly different rules than in the past. These 8 players qualified through MMR rather than through points, and they had a minimum 15 game requirement over the course of 3 days. Those 3 days were those past 3 days. It was Thursday through Friday, Friday through Saturday, and Saturday through Sunday. And you might be wondering why I'm giving windows. It's because it was a little bit weird. It wasn't exactly like, oh, here's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It was like Thursday through Friday. Don't ask too much. It gets a little bit weird and complicated, but all you need to know is that there was this awesome, effective tournament / event that was happening over this past weekend. During all the Brood War announcement, during the Ting Open, during the GSL Finals, these players were laddering their hearts out to try and qualify for their chance at WCS Challenger to hopefully get flown out to DreamHack Austin. And unfortunately, we didn't really get to see a lot of this. If you were tuning in for some of their streams, many of the players like Panda Bear Me, M Canning, Puck, and many others, Jon Snow was also streaming a little bit. These guys are playing on the North American ladder to try and qualify for WCS Challenger. So that's pretty much the only kind of glimpse into that world that we really got to see. So I am here. I've collected replays from all of the players who have qualified for WCS Challenger, or as many have responded as possible. I messaged all of them, and I got a response from almost all of them. So we are going to be hopping in and doing a little bit of post-game coverage or post-game recap, whatever you want to call it, post-event recap of these games. And I asked all the players to send me their favorite games, their most epic, fun games to watch from the ladder qualifiers, so that we can get a little bit hype about all those awesome games that they were playing, because it was stressful. Every game, win or loss, had a huge impact on their MMR, had a huge impact on their ability to either relax for a little bit, like Peely, who would just climb to the absolute top, or if you were on the very edge, like Game Time, and qualified in the 8th place spot. And actually, I want to just really quickly, before we get too far into everything, I want to show you guys, this is what the final standings were. You can see over here, there are a lot more players than 8. There's actually 16 players listed here, but only 8 of them ended up qualifying. That's because only players from I should not even say North America, it's only players from Canada and the United States were eligible for WCS Challenger. So we had Peely coming in first place, True coming in second place because he is a resident within the United States, lives at the Psystorm Gaming House, and has met the quota for number of games you need to play. I believe Peely also had to meet that quota, but you don't generally think of him like that. He's been around in the United States for such a long time now. Optimus was uneligible. For those who don't know, he is a player from the Netherlands, I believe, Europe. Scarlet, of course, is the 3rd player that qualified. Masa being the 4th. Cham, Latin American Mexican Zerg player, was not eligible. Knock him out of here. He's playing in Copa America. Semper, 5th player. We had a barcode account, obviously ineligible. Hush, a Korean player for Dust, ineligible. Namshar, European player, ineligible. Jon Snow, number 6. And, of course, we have Snoot. Everyone knows he's a European player. Crow, actually, it's the Smurf account of Nightmare, for those who are wondering. The Korean player, Protoss player Nightmare. So, of course, he is ineligible. Puck was number 7. Jim Rising, unfortunately, and I think he was not fully aware of this, but Latin American players, again, Mexican Zerg player, not eligible for WCS Challenger, since he has Copa America. And Game Time, the 8th player. What you do not see down below Game Time is Panda Bear Me sitting not too far behind him. Well, actually, at the end of it, he was sitting about 100 MMR behind, which is a reasonable distance in terms of MMR, but it was a very close competition between those two players. And even M. Canning was very, very close until maybe the last hour or two, where I think he ended up facing off against somebody and ended up losing quite a few games. And I think it just kind of went downhill from there. Very, very exciting thing. But we're going to be covering games from a lot of these players, including players like M. Canning, including some of the other players that didn't necessarily manage to qualify, but still showed some awesome and epic games. And you know what? We are not going to delay any longer, because I've already talked a lot about what's been going on. I'm sure you guys have a pretty good idea. Let's get into the games and see what kind of games were actually played by these players. What kind of awesome, epic matches took place on the ladder behind closed doors. So let's go and get started as we hop into our first game of the day. Spawn down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. Actually, you know what? No. Hold on. We're gonna pause this for a moment, okay? Because we need to build this up, all right? We need to talk about all these players. What we are seeing right now is we're seeing these ladder games, but the important thing is we're doing this to learn more about these players. For anyone that is not super familiar with them, we're gonna go over them. We're gonna talk about these players, because the North American ladder, despite a lot of, I guess, contrary belief, has some really awesome and epic players. And of course, this is a very, very inaccurate statement to say that this is Snoot versus Nurchia. So we're gonna go ahead and see if we can fix this really quickly. But I want to show you guys more about these players. What kind of background do they have? How much money have they won before? What's their win rate in these kind of different matchups? Learn a little bit more about these players before you end up seeing them in WCS Challenger, which, by the way, is going to be taking place, I believe, this Friday is when the actual WCS Challenger happens. There are going to be some qualifiers happening tomorrow that's actually going to be covered on this stream right here, as well as on, I believe, Wednesday. So it's tomorrow and day after tomorrow, you're going to have those WCS Challenger open bracket qualifiers. That's where like players like Neeb and everyone are actually going to end up playing. All right, let's see. Hopefully this fixes everything. Sweet. Okay, we should be good to go. So Jig and Semper, two players that I think are fairly solid staples in the North American scene. Jig a little bit less common to see, honestly, but he is still a very strong player. Despite what these results may have you believe, Semper's actually been doing pretty well versus Jig, it seems like, in tournament settings. Semper's definitely one of those players that also turns it on when it goes into tournaments. But a bit more about these players, as I've already been talking a little bit about them. Apparently Semper, for some reason, I'm listing him as a Zerg player. That's not supposed to be a Hydralist, but you see the Terran logo over there, so you know what I'm talking about. But both of these players earning about a little under $10,000 for Semper, a little under $5,000 for Jig. Of course, Semper representing Team OSC Root. I think one of the more well-known Terran players in the North American scene. And Terran players are a little bit of a rarity, I would say, in North America. Seeing a really good Terran player is very, very difficult to come by, I would say, in North America, and just the foreign scene in general. But Semper is very much well known for his drop play. He's known for his multi-pronged harassment and being able to pick opponents apart in just absolutely ludicrous ways. I mean, I think sometimes you would see a game with Semper and you would actually start to think, is this a Korean player? Because the multitasking capability and the mechanics of his multitasking are so ridiculously good, and he still manages to macro up behind it. I would say one of the biggest weaknesses that Semper sometimes faces is that he overcommits that multi-pronged aggression. He overcommits and ends up losing too many units and will die to a counterattack. So that's one of the things that he does struggle with, but it's a bit of a, I guess, symptom of his style. Jig is a very aggressive Zerg player from Nocturnal Gamers, and didn't end up qualifying for WCS Challenger, but still a very, very strong player. With that all being said, now we can finally hop into the game and introduce our two players in game number one. So here we have, in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, the red Zerg player representing Team Nocturnal Gamers. Give it up for Jig. I believe a Canadian Zerg player. It seems like this may not have been their first game, but spawning up here in the top left-hand corner of the map of Belshare Vestige, we have the blue Terran player from Root OSC. It is Semper. And of course, I always imagine now whenever I say Root OSC that Wardy is in the behind me saying, no, it's OSC Root, not Root OSC. I'm like, okay, man, I'm never going to remember that until after I say it. So, we got Belshare Vestige from this latter game. It seems just based on the chat that this probably wasn't their first game. And for those who don't know, Semper is a French-Canadian, and I believe Jig is also a French-Canadian, which would explain all of the, I believe, French being spoken right now. Now, I'm not a translator, and I'm not gonna lie, I can't really Google Translate on the fly right here. That's not really in the capabilities of my technology setup for this stream. But I'm gonna assume that they're being pretty friendly with each other. It seems like they're talking maybe about various other things, because it seems like this guy's Jig is complaining about Cloak right now, so maybe struggling with DTs, maybe struggling with Banshees. Not entirely sure, but either way, should be a fun one. Again, Semper is that really, really aggressive player, but he's aggressive in the late game. He's one of the players that you'll maybe sometimes put on a little bit early aggression, you know, get out that standard Reaper play that so many Terran players seem to love. And he'll go into the later stages of the game, but it's never really heavy early game aggression. It's heavy mid and late game aggression. He needs the macro and the resources to produce enough units to pick his opponent apart. In the meanwhile, Jig is, on the other hand, is that kind of player that I expect to see him get really aggressive early game. I expect to see him try and throw his opponent off with early game, large number of Zerglings. And we already do have 6 Zerglings out right now, but they are going to be used purely on the defense over here. Zergling speed is on the way, but it's not going to be finishing up for a while. And Semper should be able to kill a few of these Zerglings, maybe even be able to get a drone or two if he's really, really on point. Jig, of course, doing a really nice job migrating these drones back. Almost ends up losing one of them, but managed to push back Semper's Reaper. And 2 Zergling kills is definitely nice for Semper. I think sometimes Terran players feel like they can't get any damage done whatsoever. Zerg players have gotten so good at defending against that single Reaper. But seems like it's not going to be the case. Semper at least able to get some sort of damage done for that Reaper. And, of course, some scouting information. Although he never really ends up making it into the main base, you can probably start to guess, okay, yeah, you got a couple of Zerglings, but not an overwhelming number. You probably have Zergling speed being researched. It'd be pretty weird not to see that unless you're playing some kind of ultra greed. So Semper is going to be able to back up, say, yep, I'm going to get up my, looks like a factory with a reactor. So he's going to go into that reactor Hellion play, get up a tech lab, start researching up stim, and gets up a very fast 3rd CC. So he is going to be all about that economy play I was talking about. And it seems like Jig may be thinking the same thing. Getting up his own 3rd expansion relatively quickly. Gets up the double Evo chamber to start up very, very fast upgrades. In fact, going to be beating Semper to the punch by a good bit. Semper, having invested into that early 3rd CC, does mean he doesn't have those extra resources to do something like throw down 2 engineering bases and start up his own upgrades. In fact, he doesn't have his 2nd gas geyser at all. So I think those kind of things are going to be a little bit difficult to do. Now he's going to start banking up a little bit of gas. As you can see, he's building up that reactor, which can take up some of the gas, but now it's pretty much, I imagine, was going to be Hellions, but he's going to build another reactor as he wants to plop one of those barracks onto that reactor. There's going to be the double engineering base being part of Wallin. Always a bit of a questionable thing. Some Terran players just really don't mind it. They say, you know what, engineering base, they're pretty cost effective. They build pretty quickly. Yeah, we can throw that up, but of course, it is always a bit of a regret whenever the engineering bases do get sniped off. Reaper comes in and sort of sacrificial lamb over there to get some scouting information for the Hellions to see, okay, how many queens do you have? You finished up Zergling speed. Did you get out any roaches? And of course, did notice the roach warren, I'm sure, but didn't see any roaches out just yet. Seems like he's going to play a little bit more passive with these Hellions, just poke and prod a little bit. Maybe try and pick off an active creep tumor. But not really able to get a ton of damage done so far. But there we end up seeing double upgrades finally starting up for Semper. A little bit later on that armor upgrade, but well, Jig definitely has a really nice upgrade lead of at least 45 seconds or so. Whether or not he's going to be able to take advantage of that upgrade lead is still to be seen, but I'm loving the timing of all these upgrades are going to be finishing up. We got layer tech finishing up right before the 2-2 will be ready to be researched. So Jig could really secure himself a very solid mid-game stage where he has that good old upgrade lead, and unless Semper can really overwhelm him in a lot of different angles, which, let's be real, that is Semper's strength, his strong point in his play. But if he doesn't, then Jig is going to get into a much better position moving into the late game. He's going to be able to have that potential to transition out to ultras even maybe a little bit faster. Just because if you can make do with a fewer number of Zerglings, make do with a few number of Mutalisks, and hold off that drop aggression, just because you have better upgraded units, you can hold off against the Marine drops a little bit more easily. You can transition a little bit faster because you have those extra resources to work with. Okay, but for now, we do have Armory finally coming on up. It's going to be timing out around the time that that +1 weapons upgrade finishes up. Semper finally ends up landing that 3rd CC, is going to be able to start to mine from it. Of course, most Terran players are going to be a little bit more passive in the early stages with that 3rd CC, since they don't want to overcommit to it and get just overwhelmed by a ton of Zerglings. But here we're finally seeing the first bit of real aggression coming out from Semper. Yeah, the Reaper was there. Yeah, the 2 Hellions poked out, but this is what Semper lives for, is medevac drop harassment. He's going to come in from the same side with both medevacs, this time at least. Oftentimes, you'll end up seeing Semper load up this 3rd medevac over here and float around on the opposite side of the map. Zerglings are going to try and get a full surround over here. I don't think there are any Banelings out just yet, so Semper has to pick up and ends up losing a few of those Marines, unfortunately for him. So it does hurt the power of this push-in. You got 2 Hellions just sitting over there by the Zelnaga Watchtower, not making a whole lot happen. 2 more medevacs, almost full of units, not quite 2 full medevacs, I think. Yeah, I think it's 2 Marines short of 2 full medevacs. But going to be moving along that right-hand side. Jig, though, doing a really nice job pushing everything back, even taking up to Hive Tech behind this. Whoa, no Spire needed, it seems like, for him. Just sitting on a safety Roach run that he made earlier on in the game. Maybe a little bit concerned about the Hellbat aggression or something like that, but I think it was mostly just because Jig hadn't really scouted a whole lot. Hellions, or I should say Hellbats, and these Marines all going to get surrounded. Queen's getting very, very far forward. Man, Jig has been so on point with this creep spread. It is just absolutely tearing up through the map, and that makes it so much easier for these Queens to be aggressive. Zergling's now streaming on into the 3rd expansion of Semper. He's got a pretty nice wall in over here, and he's got a good repair spot over by that bunker, so he's going to be able to force things back. 2 medevacs on the bottom left-hand side of the map do try to drop, but not really finding a whole lot of angles. Only 5 or so Marines left. Shouldn't be able to accomplish a whole lot, although I'm sure that every Zerg player out there is saying, no, that's what you think, Fear Dragon, but they're going to be able to accomplish all of their hopes and dreams because they got 2 medevacs to heal them up. Jig, of course, saying no, and doesn't seem like Semper's going to be able to do too much more over here. Maybe be a little bit annoying here and there, but these are going to pretty much have the things covered. And Jig isn't even investing all of his defenses on these 2 medevac drops with the 5 Marines or so. He's got a handful of units up here over here on the top right-hand side. His Hive Tech should be finished up, and here he goes. Trying to move in with the Banelings, but nice creep spread scans actually do clean up some of that creep, so not fully connected over here. The Banelings engaging off a creep, but Zerglings now managed to find a run-by into the natural expansion. Semper's depots are up. Widow Mines do manage to connect on a lot of the SCVs as well as those Zerglings, doing a little bit of friendly fire damage, but Semper still has a healthy 57 workers, and that's all you really need, I think, as a Terran player on 3 bases. +2 weapons was finished up a while ago for Semper, but looks like that +2 armor started up much, much later on. So the upgrade counts have mostly evened up, minus that 1 armor upgrade, but +3 on the way. Carapace upgrade actually starting up a little bit later. I guess if you do have Adrenal Glands coming out, +3 melee attacks is definitely a little bit nicer to have. Ooh, I like this. Spore Crawlers coming out over here for Jake, just to try and deflect drops a little bit more easily. I don't see that coming out too often from Zerg players in the late game, but I do like it, especially against a player like Semper, who, again, if he had a spirit animal, it would be the medevac. But here we go. Ultralisk coming on out. We got a couple of infestors that do have pathogen glands, so they have enough energy for fungals. Semper has to be careful. Does he even have the high ground vision? He does from those medevacs, but gonna be coming out a little bit late. All of these Marines getting so close to popping. Doesn't seem like Jig has enough energy to follow this up. Widowman's going off on nearly everything except for the Banelings. And it seems like there may just be too many Zerglings over here for Semper to really take an engagement. He has to back off. Doesn't even have that many medevacs still alive, because it seems like these Queens may have been able to pick off some of them. Really needs to get an Overseer over here, though. Really needs to clean up some of these Widowmines. These Widowmines can actually start to kill Ultralists as they start to rally in. Looks like a single Liberator in the mix right now. 2 Liberators out on the map for Semper. Will be slightly helpful for dealing with these Ultras, but once that Ultra count starts to grow, you really need more than just 1 or 2 of these Liberators. Oh boy, that rally in from Semper, or sorry, from Jig is going to be absolutely devastated pretty soon. Even those ultras starting to take some damage. A lot of the Zerglings go down. You do want those Zerglings for that kind of frontline tanking, but you could use them for counterattacks as well. Round number 2, Jig didn't manage to make a whole lot of damage happen over here the first time, but seems like he may be able to make a lot more damage happen this time. Semper's going to do his best to deal with this, but doesn't quite pay attention to those units that are rallying in to reinforce. Has to lift up his 3rd expansion, but manages to pick off his opponent's 4th expansion. The Queen's also going to be very vulnerable. A lot of high energy Queens. Beautiful fungal. Oh my god. Gonna pop so many of these Marines. That really makes it a lot easier to deal with, but he's still losing his 3rd base. Most of his economy is being lost over there. At the same time, Jig, if he loses his own 3rd, he doesn't have any mining really going on. And it seems pretty likely that that is going to be exactly the case. Looks like a 4th command center was picked off. Oh no, Semper doesn't quite lift off in time. Jesus Christ, so many Widow Mines over here. Widow Mines single-handedly killing these Ultralisks. Bit of friendly fire damage also done to Semper's army though. So still has to be a bit wary about the Ultras and their cleave damage, but Overseer moves in and should be able to pick off some of these Widow Mines, if not all of them. The 2 Ultras do manage to survive, but it does seem like Jig keeps alive quite a few of his own Ultras, and Semper is going to be very much on the defensive, not really having much of an economy. He does still have that 3rd command center, that 3rd orbital command that he lifted off, and oh my god, is he going to supply block his opponent with the Widow Mines? That would be a bit of a first right now for me. This is going to be a huge loss for Semper. Ooh, he does unburrow and reburrows just the ones that still have their shots left, but looks like now all of them are gone. Is at least going to be able to retreat out with half of the Widow Mines. And that is a bit of a victory, because honestly, it seemed like he was going to lose a huge investment. I mean, losing 10 or so Widow Mines is not really something that Semper can afford to lose right now when he's, again, only just now reestablishing that 3rd expansion. It's a very low econ situation here, as both of these players sitting very, very barren on minerals and gas. Seems like Semper is building up a little bit of a mineral or a gas bank right now, but I think Marines is what he really needs. Beautiful Widow Mine connections on all of those Banelings. Cleans up so much of Jig's army. Now Jig does get a big Zergling run by once again. Oh, these have been the bane of Semper's existence, no pun intended, as it constantly pulls him back. A good fungal growth once again. Jig has been so on top of those fungals this game, pushing Semper further and further back into his 3rd expansion, lifting up all of his units into his medevacs. The SCVs are unfortunately not going to get lifted up, even though I think some of these medevacs have some space left over. I mean, what's there to fear? There's no Queens available. Oh no, Semper misses an opportunity to keep some of those workers alive. Unfortunately, he loses quite a few of them, but fortunately, he only really is mining on 1 base, so he picks up some of them at least. Oh no, the horrible command can start burning. I almost wonder, would Jig be better off just making sure that nothing is able to get over here and start repairing? Looks like those Liberators are going to siege up to try and protect that 3rd expansion, but the Ultras and these Zerglings have moved on to their next target. That's going to be the natural expansion. Good lift up over there from Semper. He's not going to be taking too much more damage, and the Liberators make it really awkward for Jig to try and escape out of here. Even focus firing down the Ultralist, making sure it's not targeting some useless Zerglings or anything like that. No. Going for those value targets. And Semper is able to get his mining up and running once again. Seems like Jig was able to get up his own 3rd expansion, but no 4th expansion in sight, and he just re-droned. Don't let it fool you, though. All of those drones are units that I think Jig is going to be needing pretty soon. He's relying on these counterattacks, which are doing a pretty damn good job right now as he chases around those SCVs. Kills off at least a few units. Now even forcing out a scan. It may not seem like a big deal, and I don't think it was entirely worth it for Jig to lose all those Zerglings, but forcing out a scan, of course, does do its own form of damage, losing out on that mule potential. Although Semper does have quite a few mules and, of course, scans banked up right now, which I don't think is a too terrible of a decision. Taking a good engagement is going to be pretty damn important to make sure he can try and find a way to come back in this game, but he has the bigger army, 72 army supply to 42, but the big fear is just the fact that he is sitting up against a 3-3 upgraded Ultras, Zerglings with crack, or not with crack. That would also be a very, very scary thing to see, but Zerglings with the adrenal glands upgrades, cracklings, and infestors These infestors looking for a big flank with a fungal growth. There's no scans being thrown down right now. Massive fungal growth coming down. The entire army is going to get obliterated by these ultras. Liberator's doing some really, really good damage, locking down at least one of those ultralists and killing them off. But Semper returns home, bruised and battered with only medevacs to spare. And Jig, can he actually just shut down all the mining now? There are still a few Liberators that are going to go 100% uncontested. Is this going to be enough? Is this going to be enough to force Jig back? It seems like he's going to be able to kill off a free Ultralist. That's not too bad. Jig has a surprising lack of units right now. He's still got the Infestors available. I guess Infestors could Fungal Growth plus Infested Terran these Liberators out of the sky. It does take a while for those Infested Terrans to pop, though. I think there might even be enough time for these Liberators to unsiege and move into a different spot. Marines is trying to force back Jig, though, and Jig really need to make the damage happen right then and there. He killed off a few workers, sure, but again, Semper is a Terran player on 3 orbital commands. Floating over one of them over to a new base. I mean, the Nomad Terran strikes again. Jig is really the one in a more desperate economic situation. He's mined out of his natural expansion. He's mined out of his main base, of course, and is only mining off of what? 22 workers when he really can only mine effectively off of 8. This has definitely become more than a little bit of a problem for Jig. He cannot replenish that supply that he lost. And he'd need to make the damage happen more significantly over there. Killing off an expansion. I mean, having some form of anti-air to shut down those Liberators. The Liberator count has continued to grow. Does he even have the Queen count? No, he has 1 Queen. That's it. 1 Ultralisk. He is banking on the fungal growths of a lifetime. And unfortunately, those Spore Crawlers, while they may look like fungal growths, they are not fungal growths. Queen goes down. The entire anti-air minus 1 infestor is completely dead for Jig right now, and so is his only mining base. He's trying to reestablish another base over here, but I think that Semper's just done a little bit too much. He's been able to crawl his way back into this game despite taking massive losses. Jig is going to be able to try and shut down some mining on the other side of the map, but again, oh, okay, they're good fungal growth, but men, ladies and gentlemen. I believe he's talking in French right now. But what a sick game from both of these players. Beautiful engagements from Jig, game after game, or I should say engagement after engagement, but Semper takes the game. Won himself quite a few MMR. Oh, whoops, that's the wrong player. Semper wins himself the game and wins himself quite a few MMR points, I'm sure. That helped him qualify for WCS